as I indicated in our program, in one of our annual conferences in Spokane, Ashley outlined for us the challenge of preservation and maintenance at the city level, and that the suggestion that he and John Coster had for counties, that the underfunding was as great as, and the backlog resulting was as great cumulative for cities and counties as it was at the state level. I'm interested in hearing what he has to say about what the Move Ahead Washington program did and didn't do for cities, and if he can give us a comment on where we are 5 years on from Spokane, about where city funding for preservation and maintenance is. I'd appreciate that too. So Ashley, please take it away. And thank you.
Thanks, Will. Will, can everybody hear me, and can you see my screen? Just to process check.
Yes and yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for the invitation. Again, I'm Ashley Probart, and I'm the Executive Director for the Transportation Improvement Board. And let's just see here. What's going on? How come my slide? And just as a quick reminder, the Transportation Improvement Board is a 21-member board. It's comprised mostly of city and county officials, as well as private sector, ports, special needs, and non-motorized transportation. And I like to say that we fund good projects, and the definition of good projects are all cities in the urban portion of counties. And what you see here is about a look back of the past 20 years of projects throughout the state. And by statute, we're required to apportion our funds based on a combination of population, I believe, road miles. So what I thought would be instructive to Will's question is, how do cities get to yes, or counties get to yes on funding projects? And everybody wants to get a grant that has high dollar value and high success. And I've been kind of tracking this for about the past 15 years. And this is what I've seen or experienced, is that TIB tends to be in the high success, high dollar component, because we fund about $100 million a year, and we're an annual program. Where, by way of example, I put the Public Works Trust Fund in there, and for years it was feast or famine due to state legislature pulling back funds. Transportation benefit districts tend to be higher success. There's over 100 of them in the state now, but they don't generate a lot of money. So these are the sort of things that cities and counties look at when they're putting together a project. And this is particularly important if you're an urban project. This is the sort of punch list that a jurisdiction has to go through and determine what are their chances of getting to yes on a larger project. So it's not necessarily preservation, but when all your money is sucked into one or two big urban projects, preservation tends to suffer if that becomes the case. So when we look at this, to pivot slightly to TIB, on the urban side, when you look at that laundry list, 80% of TIB money is driven towards the big urban arterial projects, yet it only represents about 7 to 5% of an actual big urban project. But it's the game changer. We are the finishing touch, if you will, on an urban project. On the left side of this slide, and this is data from the Joint Transportation Committee, I'd say we're the lifeline for small cities. We, especially the smallest of the small under 2,000, we're about half their funding of any project. And for small cities, that's really code for preservation. So where does our funding come from? We've been capped for decades at about 3 cents of the gas tax. That same 3 cents was around when the state gas tax was, I think, at 25 cents a gallon. So that gives you a sense that we've been held fairly flat in terms of historic distributions. And we rely on that. 3 cents of gas tax is roughly $90 to $100 million a year in direct to cash revenue. We do not bond, so we're pretty much a cash flow agency. And then we've got this rising income stream of the electric vehicle fee. So in short, every time you buy a car that's an electric vehicle, that $100 or $150 fee, 15 cents on that dollar goes to the Transportation Improvement Board, 15 cents to the County Road Board. And to give you a sense of scale, in 2017, when I came on board, the EV collections was $48,000. And our small city preservation program by statute is a $1 million per year distribution. So our electric vehicle fee is starting to approach our small city preservation program distributions. We also have Connecting Washington money. It's not codified, meaning it's not. It's at the discretion of the legislature to fund this program. provide this funding. And we learned during the last Tim Eyman initiative that funding went away. In the Move Ahead Washington, we're excited that there's a $10 million per biennium commitment for city preservation, or $80 million over the life of the act. Again, not codified, and the Complete Streets program will effectively double, assuming the Climate Commitment Act funds come forward. So to give you a sense, where is that 10 million going to go with Move Ahead Washington, or the 5 million per year? It's going to be peppered, if you will, throughout our urban arterial program, which has a preservation component, our classic arterial preservation program, which I'll touch on in a minute, and our small city preservation program. So it's about a 5% increase. And just as a quick reminder, we have tight delivery standards. So once we put a project, make an offer, and the city or county signs the contract, you can see if it's a big urban project, you have 4.5 years to get it to bid, and all others are about 1 to 2.5 years. And if we're rolling 300 to 400 projects, 98% meet that standard. So we are very much on it. And when it comes to preservation projects, usually when we award in November, the following summer, those projects are underway. So let's talk about the Small City Street Preservation Program. So key features: it's only for cities under 5,000, and it's all streets, residential, Main Street, etc. And the emphasis is on repair and maintenance versus hardcore reconstruction. We've also introduced a low maintenance program for crack sealing, etc., with the idea that these are $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 grants, and then that sets you up for a preservation project the next year, where we think we're going to get a better bidding climate, because you can just come in and come out. To answer your question for the group, we typically fund $4 to $5 million a year, and that's by statute. We're only required to fund $1 million, but the board has chosen to overinvest, if you will. But by overinvesting as a board decision, we still receive $8 million to $11 million annually in requests. So I've testified consistently to have a robust small city preservation program. It should be about $10 million per year. As a quick reminder, we do all the inventorying of cities under 5,000. So the entire small city network is reviewed on a once every 4-year basis. It's about 1,500 miles, and we use this data and information, or pavement condition rating, to determine where to invest best and be the most efficient with taxpayer dollars. And as a quick review, when we launched this program in 2008, if you look to the left, we had about 80, 90 cities that were not performing well, that were in dire need of preservation funding. And as we go, and you can see it's about 1,500 miles. That's the equivalent of roughly Spokane. And in our original dashboard, we had these red cities, which meant that they were in big trouble. When you looked at 2020, we've eliminated most of the red cities, and the trend is generally in the right direction, that we're getting us up on the curve to kind of keep up. And this is demonstrated in our most recent dashboard, that we have about a 72.9 average statewide, but we still have about 5 cities that are what we would say are definitely below standard. And this bears out. There's a big injection of cash in 2010, and you can see that's the blue bar charts. But if you look at the state PCR average, once we had that investment, we got a big shock to the system in the right direction. And then in the years where we haven't had the fiscal capacity to invest, you can see that the statewide PCR starts to drop once again. So it's a direct relationship or correlation with investment. The other program that we focus on is the arterial preservation program. And the idea here is, suddenly you're 5,001 in population. You no longer have your residential streets paved, but you have major arterials. And we have a handful of cities that are fairly large, but do not have a big revenue base. And so the idea behind this is that TIB would help fund the functionally classified city streets, which would allow those cities to do a fund shift to take care of their residential streets. And so the proxy for need, if you will, is $2 billion assessed value that was established in 2012. And we typically fund $6 to $8 million a year, and we have about double that in requests. So over time, as you can expect, assessed value statewide keeps going up and up. And as a result of that, we are having cities graduating out, because on paper, they were more wealthy. So let's take Port Angeles. They graduated out, but they only grew 400 people over the same 10-year period. So it was simply a virtue of property tax, not necessarily the ability to deliver. So our board took a look at that, and just this year has bumped that $2 billion assessed value back to $3 billion to bring those cities back into this program as a way of offering a focused preservation program. So as I start to wrap up here, one of the trends that I keep tracking is what is our average grant amount and how many cities are we funding? So as you can see here, the blue bar chart shows that we're around 120 to 140,000 for small city funding programs, but the red bar shows us trending down, which means that we can't go as far, we can't fund as many cities just because there's not enough money to go around. In other words, project costs keep increasing, but we just simply can't address all city needs. On the urban side, we've stayed pretty consistent at about $2.5 to $3 million per grant. But as I showed on that earlier chart, it's taking more and more partners, particularly for the urban projects, to get to yes. So that's becoming more and more of a concern on our part. So for key messages, TIB funding is gas tax dependent, and we know it's a sinking ship. This is evidenced by the growth in the electric vehicle fee and fuel efficiency, and that's a constant concern and worry. We've basically had a Band-Aid for this group's benefit that, courtesy of all the federal funding that came about in the last legislative session, it allowed a little bit of a fund shift where the legislature has given us a one-time injection, as well as caught us up on our $30 million overnight deficit when COVID hit, because our gas tax revenue is cut in half for about 8 months. So we're kind of whole at the moment, but the trend is down as we look ahead. The other thing I would call out is that the 5% increase, or $5 million per year with Move Ahead Washington, it's our first increase since 2012. So depending on which base you look like, it's not significant money through that lens. Again, it's not codified, so we're programming money we can't count on. And this year's inflation has eliminated any gain that we might have seen from that funding. So we're still at about 50% of funding our grant applications, and we will see this year how we do. And then the last thing I'd offer up is, I mentioned we're offering either the same number of grants at a smaller amount, or to really get a project to yes, we're going to have to start having fewer and fewer applicants receive funding. And I should mention that through TIB, we're very direct with our customers. Wait till next year, you're not a good fit, or you have a $30 million project and we can only offer $3 to $4 million. So until you come up with the other 25 million, don't knock on our door. So I want to leave the impression that this pretty much largely understates the larger transportation need that's out there, but based on how our program is managed, that's what the data shows us. And so with that, I will stop and answer